So in this break-even equation, average weaning weight is actually the least complex of all three of the numbers that we're going to use. And so there's some really um, pretty straightforward ways to increase calf weaning weight. And so a lot of those actually really go back to genetic factors. So using breeds that are larger in general, have faster growth rates, like some of our continental breeds, Charolais, Simmental, Limousin cattle. You could use crossbreeding programs that is going to utilize um, hybrid vigor from multiple breeds and gene recombinations. And then you could also look at selecting animals that are higher in growth rate within your herd or within a breed as well. So an example of that would be like if we take all of the cattle that are registered with the Angus Association, or all the bulls that are registered with the Angus Association, there are going to be lower performing bulls that are lower growth rate bulls, and there's going to be the higher ones. So an example would be if we use like the higher growth rate bulls from within that breed. We could also utilize growth stimulants, and we talked about what some of these were in the feedlot sector. It's fairly common on the desert to actually implant steer calves at branding. And if they're going to be on areas like that have reduced forage production, so like the Sonoran Desert or the Chihuahuan Desert, or at really high elevations during a drought year, just to capture as much growth as possible. You could also increase your feed supply. So this kind of goes hand in hand with this concept of creep feeding. And I'll be honest, I am not a fan of creep feeding because it's going to increase your annual cow cost. And in my opinion, it really masks genetics. So if you're trying to utilize cattle that are a good fit for your environment, you're never going to know if they're a good fit if you keep creep feeding their calves from birth until weaning. So we can talk more in depth about creep feeding if you want later. All right, so let's look at probably the most complex part of this whole entire equation, which is increasing percent calf crop. And so we're going to go through quite a bit of detail in the next couple of slides to increase percent calf crop. So a study about 16 years ago was conducted as a survey from ranches all across the western United States. And that study found that about 83% of pregnancy rates at the end of the breeding season was due to the cows just not being pregnant when the bulls came out. And so there's quite a bit of a percentage associated with this reason. And so this may be a low number, but it's still a pretty real number because the percent or the females not getting pregnant at the end of breeding season is a really hard number to obtain from a research standpoint. So keep in mind, in commercial cow-calf operations, especially in the West, there are no 90% pregnancy rates in this business. And so if people are telling you that they have a 90% preg rate, they are probably most likely a seed stock operation, or they are using assisted reproductive technology like AI and embryo transfer. And that, again, is not going to lend itself to decreasing annual cow costs. So you may be wasting money somewhere if you have a 90% preg rate. So just be aware of that. The second major Reason for percent calf crop being low is calves dying during the perinatal period. And so this is at birth or shortly thereafter. And this can be from dystocia issues or it can be from scours in a very young calf. The third major reason that we see low calf crop percentages is because of calf deaths in that time period between the perinatal period and weaning. And so there's about almost 3% or 2.9% of calf loss attributed to this category. And this is going to be where most of the time we may not even know what happened. So it could be an accident or it could be calves that just didn't come in with their moms in the fall. This could be also freak accident. So one story I like to tell is I have a rancher friend who had a calf that got his head stuck in the V of an oak tree and suffocated. And so it's those type of things that you can't prevent. There's just going to be bad stuff that happens. I mean, you aren't going to go and cut down every oak tree so that the calf won't get their head stuck. So that calf death from birth to weaning is kind of a big gray area, and a lot of reasons for calves not surviving that period may not be known. And finally, the fourth category here is gestational losses, which we'll get into in just a few minutes. All right, so as we start talking about each one of these four categories, we're going to start with the biggest one. So females just not getting pregnant at the end of the breeding season. And we can see basically two major reasons and a handful of smaller reasons that this happens. So first and foremost is agroshiriosis, which is not a scientific term. It's one that's made up by ranchers. And so it really means a lack of groceries. And so these are nutritional inadequacies that can result in certain nutrient deficiencies. So it could be decreased protein, decreased energy, or decreased mineral. Specifically, selenium and copper are a big issue in our neck of the woods. I have a friend from Australia, Alf Collins. He's in Queensland, so in the northeastern part of the country, and that is a tropical region. So he runs he runs several thousand head of cattle, and he's an extreme rancher, and so he has a theory that if you're not getting 85% preg rates, then you're not pushing your cows hard enough. Meaning that if you get something over 85%, you are leaving money on the table somewhere else, and so you're not pushing your cows hard enough. And so there's some logic to Alf's theory, but I'm not sure I buy completely into it. But that is a theory out there among some ranchers. The second major reason that cows just don't get pregnant at the end of breeding season is because they're not matched to their environment. And so this is where we see people using Brangus cattle in North Dakota or Angus cattle in South Texas. So it's really important that you match cows to their environment. And then there's a handful of other reasons that this could be happening as well. So crossbreeding. So there's when utilizing multiple breeds in a breeding system, the genes during meiosis are going to rearrange and result in hybrid vigor. And this is going to be discovered in lowly heritable traits, so things like reproduction and disease resistance. And so people may not be using the right genetics or crossbreeding as a part of their program, therefore they have cows not come or not get pregnant. Bull management is another big area that people tend to neglect. And so bull nutrition is a really big piece of this puzzle. So making sure that bulls have adequate body condition and an increasing plane of nutrition as they move out into the breeding season. So this time of year, bulls need to be in really good body condition so that they can go breed cows for the rest of the spring and the summer. And so you also need, as a management scenario here, you need to make sure that you prioritize traits for your herd. So keep in mind that when you use young bulls, yes, they may have the best genetics that are available on the market, but they need more management because young bulls are going to breed less cows. And so it's important that you maintain a mature bull battery, so bulls that are 3, 4, and 5 years old, with a balance of bringing in new genetics. And so bull management can get or can be a very big piece of this puzzle as well. In addition to that, you also need to make sure that you semen test bulls annually to make sure they're fertile, have appropriate bull to cow ratios. So average bull to cow ratios are about 1 bull to every 25 cows. If you're in extreme range situations with lots of topography, really rough terrain, that can come down to one bull per 15 head of cows. And then if you're in a pretty soft environment like the university farm cows, you can actually increase the number of cows upwards to 35 per 1 bull. And so that bull to cow ratio becomes really important too. And keep in mind, you also want to keep things like calving ease and lack of dystocia in the front of your mind. So making sure that the dam has adequate pelvic area and that you're breeding 2-year-old heifers that just had their first calf in a managed situation, because not only are they nursing a calf, trying to get pregnant with another calf, they've also just lost their first set of teeth and they're still growing. So they have the most nutrient demand associated with them. And so the second category is perinatal calf deaths. So we see about 6.4% of decrease in calf crop because of this perinatal period. And again, a lot of this has to do with dystocia issues. So the bulls are too big, they're going to throw calves that are too big in weight. The female is too small. A rule of thumb is that if you assist more than 10% of your heifers, then you need to change your breeding program. So just out at the university farm, we had about 30 heifers this year, and if we assisted more than 3 of those heifers, then we're going to be hunting for new bulls to use in our herd. And so the second major reason we see calf deaths in this perinatal period is because of scours. So scours are actually a symptom. Okay, so the scours could be the result of either a viral or a bacterial disease. And so in extreme cases, you may lose up to 40% of your calf crop. And you usually end up treating 100% of those calves. And essentially the calf ends up dying because of dehydration. And so the vector here is Cryptosporidia. And that is tends to be what causes most of our scour issues. And so this is where changing some management might actually be beneficial. You could calve in the fall, which has less issues. If you are in the northern states like Wyoming or Montana, you may end up having to calve cows inside a confined area, like in a barn. And if you don't clean that out regularly, that is just a really good vector for the Cryptosporidia to actually develop, and just everything will be sick that comes into that area. You could also rotate calving pastures, which is one way that we've dealt with scours here in the North State. You can use some vaccines to control it, but usually management of like rotation of calving pens, cleaning, those type of things is going to be a better management of scours in addition to vaccinations.